Why don't preamps contain sources? Now that's a good question, and it's been asked very, very often, so I thought I would just include it. It comes to us from David in the UK. Hey Paul, I have one of your preamp, DAC, and power amps. They're all BHKs. Yes. Plus cables and deck taps. I'm a devoted British user. Question, why no combined streamer preamp of identical quality without DAC so that I do not need an extra streamer? And this very same question was asked also from Robert just down the street in Dublin, Ireland. And it was funny. I mean, I don't know how the universe collides like that, but somehow or other, these two, maybe they conspired. Maybe that's what it is. But the only reason I brought up, I wanted to give Robert in Dublin credit as well. But Robert adds, hey, read a quick little chapter thing out of your book. Well, okay, then we'll get to this question. So, you know, my book, 99% True, it's out, it's published. I wrote it for you. It's the story of my misbegotten youth, and I'll read I'm not going to read a chapter. I mean, there's a whole audio book out. You can hear that. I don't want to bore everybody with a chapter. I'll read you just a quick one. So I had, just to build up to this, I had gotten 14 tickets in the course of a month or so for the same violation. I had an old Austin Healey sports car, a red 3000. And I kept getting the same ticket. No brake lights, no tail lights. And I kept going, F it. I crumpled them up and threw them in the thing. And then one day, I got a warrant for my arrest. So here I am dealing with that. The next day, Dad and I went to the Orange County Courthouse in Santa Ana. I, dressed in my best pants and a press shirt, waited for an hour as criminal after criminal was sentenced to jail terms of various lengths. Their heads were bowed, their eyes glued to the floor, their shoulders drooped. "Paul McGowan," droned the clerk. She wore pointy tortoiseshell glasses that hung halfway down her nose and were secured by a gold chain. 14 vehicle violations and failure to appear. "How do you plead?" asked the judge. "Well, innocent. I mean, you know, I don't have to be prosecuted for this because the car's been sold. So the question is moot." Well, the judge glanced at the document, then looked up. "And of the failures to appear?" "Well, I didn't know any better, Your Honor." "Then you plead guilty." "No, sir, I plead ignorance." "Not in my court," he barked. $250 or 14 days in jail. Well, I'll take the $250. I was directed to the bailiff, a short, stocky, balding man sitting behind a desk. "We only take cash." I looked up at my father, who shook his head. Then, without a word, he turned and walked out of the courtroom. He was gone. I stood there in disbelief. "Do you have any money?" And that's when it hit me. I was going to jail. Me, Paul McGowan, a jailbird, abandoned by my family and left to rot like the dozens of others who I had just watched led off to the gallows. And I go off to jail. Anyway, if you have a chance, I wrote it for you. So pick up a copy at Amazon. 99% true. Okay, so why don't preamps have sources? I think this is a terrific question from both of these guys, because frankly, I agree. Preamps should have sources. Really, we have too many boxes today. And I really want to put on my list of things to do a new type of device. A device that's a group of sources with a volume control, source preamp, call it what you want. We have an integrated that's coming out, I don't know, sometime probably late this year. And it will have a source in it. It's a streaming source, so you'll be able to stream to it. We have Sprout, which has a source, a streaming source. But it's not quite the same. So if we look back over the history of how all this happened, stereo systems originally were built with a source. They had a turntable. It was a box, right? And it had a turntable and a phono preamp and a power amplifier and a speaker. They were all in one. And everything you needed was right there. Over time, people realized that we could do better by having separates. And then different sources came in. So at first we only had vinyl. Later we had radio. And what else? Well, then tape came in. So over time, the sources grew in numbers, and hi-fi as an industry was growing, especially the high end, where we started separating everything. So then you could buy the best FM tuner that you wanted. Maybe you could buy the best tape deck that you wanted, and then hook all that up through a preamp, and then that into a power amp, and then into speakers. Then came the receiver. So with a receiver, that was basically a power amp, a preamp, and a radio. And now we got back to having a source if all you wanted to listen to was radio. Not many wanted to do that. And there have been consumer versions that are kind of all in one. They have disc players and all kinds of stuff, but they were usually crap. In the high-end audio industry, we're still kind of mired in this notion of separates that someday I would definitely like to address. And so that's kind of the reason historically why all that happened. And I think at PS Audio anyway, we want to address that problem by someday coming out with a preamp that has multiple sources, which I think would be very cool. The only problem with that is I can't really build a turntable into a preamp very easily. So, unless it's vinyl, no one listens to radio anymore. Most of it's internet. So like I say, we are building sources more and more into our products, but those sources are the internet connected streaming services or hook your computer up. So, all right, thanks. And thanks for listening to the little brief chapter. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye.